My name is Sam Cheng, and I teach a governmental and nonprofit accounting class here at UTD. I've also had the privilege of being involved in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years and started in public accounting, but then one day I got a call from a client of mine that said that there's an opening at the Dallas Museum of Art. Never thought about at the time of leaving the public accounting sector, but got this offer and went and interviewed at the Dallas Museum of Art, and I've been lucky enough to be a CFO and a controller at some of the large Dallas nonprofits here. So I'm here to kind of tell you about a rewarding career in nonprofit accounting and what it's meant to me and to my family, my career. So I started, of course, in public accounting. I would always recommend that, and I recommend to my students that they get a little bit of public accounting experience. I worked my way up through the consulting and the audit side, worked at Grant Thornton, and got some great experience, which prepared me to go into the nonprofit sector. When I got the offer for the Dallas Museum of Art, I thought, okay, I'm going to have to learn a whole new accounting and type of work, and it really wasn't all that different. There were some new phases that came out right when I got into the museum, and actually FAS 116 and 117 were the key ones that came out at that time, and I learned those pretty quickly, and those really are the same phases that are kind of still in place and really dictate the way nonprofit financial statements and the way revenues and expenses are recorded on the nonprofit financial statements. So I would recommend that anyone looking to get into the nonprofit sector read up on the nonprofit sector, take my class, which is taught every semester, Governmental and Non-Profit Accounting. It also helps you prepare for the CPA exam because there are questions from my class that are on the CPA exam also. Just to tell you a little bit about my career, so working at the Dallas Museum of Art, of course, is one of the great places here in Dallas. I felt privileged to work there. I got the ability to meet some of the wealthiest and most prestigious individuals in town when I worked at the museum. They were both supporters, contributors, and many people were also on the board there. And I got to be the CFO there. I worked there for about 5 years, and really kind of learned the ins and outs of the museum business, which was quite interesting at the time. And as we kind of always said at the museum, it's you know, where else in the world can you work and have million-dollar art in your office at the same time? And so got a great experience there and did a lot of changes. We actually changed accounting systems. There are a few accounting software packages that are designed specifically for nonprofits, and I got to get a little experience in that sector. And then kind of got an inkling to kind of go on a little further, and I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more. And so I went and got an offer at the local public television station, KERA here in Dallas. It runs, at the time we had 2 television stations and 1 radio station, and was the CFO there for about 6-7 years. And again, really enjoyed working in that sector, kind of got a little bit of the television side of the business and the radio side, which was interesting. And not only was I as a CFO, but I think that also there were parts of the business where I was on air sometimes, getting on air asking for money. So if you see those pledge drives on air, sometimes I was involved in those and answering phones and a wide range of jobs at the station. And one thing I would say, if anyone looking to get into this sector, the nonprofit sector, you would have to really kind of be a multitasking individual. If you're looking to do something that's real specific, you know, a financial analyst or internal audit, probably the nonprofit sector is not what you're looking for. This sector really, because of funding and donations and really a type of business that's based upon support from donations, typically doesn't have the budget sometimes to have individuals in their organization that can do just one specific type of thing. So as you hear me kind of talk about this sector and the jobs that I've done, there's always a kind of multitasking kind of thing that you'll have to be involved in. So you may be looking at the audit one day, but you may be helping raise money the next day. You may be answering phones the next day. You may be doing operations or HR issues. And so I've always had the ability to kind of do different types of things in the organizations I work in. I worked for several other smaller nonprofits. Currently, I'm with Susan G. Komen here in Dallas, and I'm the controller. I've been there for about 5 years, and we're a very large nonprofit, and this, from my experience standpoint, is one of the largest nonprofits that I've ever worked for. We're headquartered here in Dallas, but we have offices all over the country. Actually have about 125 business units, which is very complex from a tax standpoint, and actually very complex from an audit standpoint to get all those business units involved in a consolidation process. And so I've been challenged there, and I had the ability to get experience doing large nonprofit accounting there. And the main difference that you'll see in nonprofit accounting is there are some different tax laws that handle the way revenues are recognized and what's taxable and what's not taxable. Don't be fooled by the fact that you think you're working for a nonprofit or tax exempt and that they don't pay taxes, because nonprofits do pay some taxes. That's part of the challenge of learning the business and finding out what taxes do nonprofits pay and what taxes do nonprofits don't pay. The other distinguishing factor would be the accounting, and there's some FASs that are a little bit different for nonprofits. It doesn't take a lot of study to understand the differences, but there are different ways that revenues are recognized, expenses are recognized, and the way they're allocated. And their financial statements, of course, are very different than for-profit entities. So the perfect individual, I think, that would get into nonprofit would really be someone who has kind of maybe worked their way up, or maybe been on the public accounting side and done audits or tax work for nonprofits. I've hired individuals that come in at a staff level and work their way up. Also, we've hired people that have worked for other nonprofits, maybe in the healthcare sector. It's easier, I feel like, for individuals that have worked at a staff level to make the jump from a for-profit entity to a nonprofit entity. It's a little bit more difficult for someone who's worked in nonprofit all their career to jump back into for-profit entity. But for most people that we hire, they have a little bit of experience, or they've worked in a nonprofit before. One of the other things I would say that I would really say that's part of the success of where I've been and my career has really for me to be involved in the Dallas CPA Society and the Texas Society of CPAs. I've made contacts in each of those organizations. Actually, I've chaired the Dallas CPA Society before, and I've actually served on the TSCPA Executive Committee for a few years too. So made great friends, made great contacts. I've found consultants, and I've found people to help me and find positions get filled through those organizations. And I would encourage any student to get involved at the student level and get involved in those organizations, and then be active, be on committees, be elected to the board. That's where you can get some contacts into nonprofits, for-profit sectors, public accounting. Those are great organizations for that. What kind of certifications do you need to be in the nonprofit sector? You know, really, I have people working for me that are not CPAs. I have people that work for me that are CPAs. We have some internal audit teams that work for us that they've got their internal audit certification. Those aren't necessary. It's just, I think, depends on how far you want to take it. If you really want to get up to the position where you're a controller or CFO, I would recommend that you probably do get your CPA at a minimum. But I have people that are reporting to me that are not CPAs, and they are my assistant controllers for different divisions and things like that. In the Dallas area, what are some of the organizations that an individual could get involved in the nonprofit sector? Obviously, universities, hospitals, churches, organizations like Susan G. Komen, which are health-oriented organizations. There are some primarily large nonprofits here in the Dallas area. besides us, the Boy Scouts of the USA are based here in Dallas. Also, the American Heart Association is based here in Dallas too. Large hospital networks such as Baylor, Presbyterian, a lot of these are non-profit hospitals, and they're based here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area too. So many, many opportunities. I think if you step back and look at what are nonprofits, which are defined by the IRS code 501c3, there are many opportunities for individuals to get into the nonprofit sector. It's an exciting sector. I would encourage you to get involved in it if you have an interest. And, you know, the one thing too that I say to people is that the nonprofit sector is something that you know, when you go home every day from work, you'll really feel like you've accomplished something. Every nonprofit has a mission. At Susan G. Komen, we're involved in eradicating and educating women about breast cancer. It's not like I'm going to work to create a widget or some type of product. I really feel like we're giving back to the community by what we do and our small part. And I tell my team always that we may not be the individuals that are doing the research to find a cure for breast cancer, but we are the individuals that are writing the checks so that the researchers can do that research. We're the ones making sure the money's spent correctly and reported correctly to our donors. So we have a big part in all that. Although it's a different part than the researchers, it is a big part. So you're not going to get rich working in the nonprofit sector because owning stock or owning equity in a nonprofit is worthless. So this is a specific type of industry. I think that you got to have the blood for it, and you've got to have the interest in it, and you've got to want to give back to it. How can you get involved in the nonprofit sector? I tell some of my students that are interested in getting in the nonprofit sector to volunteer for a nonprofit, work in that nonprofit, either at the accounting level, because nonprofits are always looking for people to volunteer. At Susan G. Komen, we have thousands and thousands of volunteers that volunteer nationally to do our accounting at the affiliate level. So you can always volunteer to work in a nonprofit. The other thing you can do, I think, is get involved with any organization you may be with, whether you're with a fraternity or a group here at the university. Get involved with that group and ask them to do some volunteer work for a nonprofit. I know here last year at the university, they also had a group that actually registered for the race, the Susan G. Komen race, the Dallas race. Got involved, and everything I heard from my students that were involved in it was a very rewarding experience. So get involved. It's a great sector, the nonprofit sector.